Hello friends, today we are going to discuss about strongly typed HTML helpers in MVC. So without wasting any time, let's start. As you have already seen in my previous video, we have already discussed about inline HTML helpers and built-in HTML helpers. So in this video, we are going to discuss in detail about strongly typed HTML helpers, right? And in this video, what we are going to learn strongly typed HTML helpers, strongly typed view, and how we can pass data from how we can pass data from controller to the view, and how we can send data from view to the controller, that is vice versa, by using strongly typed view, right? And also we will be discussing about some few examples like text box, checkbox control, about strongly typed HTML helpers, right? So let's start, and lot of things we are going to discuss in this video. So before we start, please like and subscribe it, and let's start. So let's flip to the Visual Studio, and we are going to create one new application. So let's create a new application. So all the steps we are going to perform similar steps as we have done earlier, right? So let's name the application. So we are going to study about strongly type. So we are naming it the same, strongly type helpers, right? Let's click on OK button. Let's choose the empty one, and we are going to add the reference of MVC. Now click on the OK button. So it will generate us the entire structure for the MVC application, right? So let's wait for the couple of seconds. So it is loading into the memory. Yes, the structure has been generated, but still it is in process. So let's wait for a couple of seconds more. Yeah, now it is completed. Now we are going to add one controller in this project. So let's add a controller, and we are going to name it, let's suppose, home controller. Click on the add button. So it will add the home controller inside the controller folder. Yes, home controller is added. And now let's add one model inside the models folder. So inside model folder, let's add one class, right? And inside that class, let's define some few properties. So let's take class name employee, add it. And inside this class, let's add some properties. So I'm doing the same thing, right? Yes. So first property name, let's take it name, and name is of string type, right? The second one is your, let's suppose, address, that is also of same type, string. And the third one, let take is employee, and let's make it boolean. And the last one, let's take age, and that is end property, right? So we have added one model inside the model folder. So we have created one simple class, and inside that class we have added some properties, right? Now let's go to the controller, and for this index section method, we are going to simply add one view, right? And let's uncheck this checkbox. We are keeping this very simple. Now let's add the index view. Yes, so index view is added, and now let's delete it. So as I already told you, we are going to discuss about strongly typed HTML helpers, right? So we are going to use this employee model, right? So we are going to this employee model on this view, right? So for using that employee model on this view, we need to tell the application, we need to tell this view that basically how we can use this employer model. So we need to tell this application, we need to give the reference of that model, right? So for telling application, we need to write using, then the application name is strongly type helper, and inside that we have this model, right? So we are going to take this model. And now we can write model and the name of the model employee, right? So by doing this, we are telling this view that this view is specifically going to use this employer model on this particular page or on this particular view, right? So by doing this, we are telling this application, or we can say this view, that this view is basically going to use this strongly type this employer model, right? Now let's add some control. Let's add some HTML helpers, right? So HTML dot now we are going to take some control text box area for, and inside that we are going to define lambda expression b dot, and after and typing the dot, now we can see all the properties whatever we have defined in this employer model. You can see address, age, right? Age, employee name, whatever we have taken, right? So let's take address, and similarly we let's define one break tag. Similarly, we are going to add some few more controls for all remaining properties whatever we have defined in this employer model, right? So next was name. Okay, next is age. Then next is your and next is your name, and the last one is your the last property it was okay this one is left is employee, and that is of bold type, right? So for this we are going to take checkbox control, right? Since it is a bold type, right? So checkbox for, and the same lambda expression, any meaningful name we can define over here, right? B dot, and we are going to take is employee, right? So till now what we have done, we have added one controller and we have added one model, and inside this model we have added some few properties, and inside this view we are telling this view by adding this reference of this model that this particular view is going to use this employer model on this view page, right? So uh, we have already defined all those controls, we have already defined all those properties in all these HTML helper controls, right? So let's save this file and now run this browser, right? So let's see what it is going to load. So by default it will run the home controller and the index section method, right? So let's see. So it's going to render in the browser. So let's wait for a couple of seconds. It is loading. On first time it takes some time, yeah. So we can see all the specific controls have been loaded for that particular employer model, right? Whatever we have associated in this index view, right? So first one is for address field, the second one is for age, and then name, and then the last one is employer, that is checkbox we have, because we this is a bold type, right? We have defined it. And if we want to check the HTML, what it has defined, uh, what it has been defined. So let's inspect, and we can check for the first control. The HTML has been generated by assigning the ID and name particular address. The second one is name. You can see the third one is your you can see age, then name, and the last one is your checkbox. You can see the checkbox ID, name and ID is this, right? ID is this and name is this, right? So this is the way how we can uh, basically relate our employer model to a particular view, right? Now let's stop this application, and now let's bind the employer model into in all these controls, right? So for binding the data, we need to send data from controller to the view, right? So now we are going to send data from this controller to this view. And how we can do this? So on this controller, we are going to use this model. And for using this model, we need to define the reference over here. So let's define using strongly type helper. Inside that, we are going to use models, right? And now we can use this employer model inside this controller, right? So inside this index section method, let's define employee object, right? New employee, right? And inside this employee, we are going to define all the properties, whatever we have taken. Address we are going to initialize. Then we have taken age. We are going to initialize. Then we have taken name. So we are going to initialize. We are going to assign some value specifically, right? And the last one it was is employee. We need to assign the true false. So let's make it true, right? So in the address we can assign, let's suppose like new UP, and in the name let's define weapon, right? So basically what we have done inside this employee model, we are assigning the data in all the properties. In a normal scenario, we used to bring this data from our database, and accordingly we pass this data from controller to the view. But to make you understand, but to make you understand, I have just hard coded all these properties, right? So let's save this and let's run the application. Oh, sorry. Before doing this, uh, let me stop this. Let me stop this. One thing I forgot to tell you. Yeah. So in this employee object, we have already binded all the data, right? And this object we are going to pass into in this view. And this view is specifically related to index view, because for this index section method, we have already created which view? This index view, right? And this index view is basically bonded to use which employee model. uh, this view is basically bonded to use this model, employee model, because we have make it strongly typed view, right? So this view is basically going to use the employer model for this view, right? The same model. So this is the way. So that's why we need to associate this object, we need to pass this object into this view. Now run this application. Now let's see, all this data will be binded in all the controls, right? So let's wait. So it is loading. So just wait for a couple of seconds. Yes, so we can see all the data has been binded in a specific control. First one is your address, then your age, then your name, and then your last checkbox. And why checkbox is a tick? Because we have assigned the true value, right? So this is the way how we can send data from controller to the view, this view, right? And now let's start how we can send data from view to the controller, right? Now we will be doing that how we can post data from this view to the controller. So for doing this, let's stop this application and go to the view, and let's assign it in, into this form by using this using block, right? So we are going to HTML dot begin form, right? And inside that we are going to assign form name. Let's suppose give a meaningful name form one, right? And inside that we need to place all the controls. So why we are using this using block? Because by using this using block, we don't need to bother about and about closing the end tag for this begin form, right? So as soon as the control will come out from this using block, that will be automatically disposed, right? So that's why by using this using block, we don't need to bother about the closing of this end form tag, right? So that's why we are using this using block. We have placed all this, and for this form, you can see that this is a very simple form, right? And on this form, whatever we have designed in this view, You can see on this form we are going to take one button to post data. So let's take one button of input type, and the type is of submit. Let's make it submit type, and let's assign some value for this input type. Let's suppose press P or click me. We can define meaningful click me, right? Now close this end tag, right? So now what we have done, so we have simply created one form, and on this form we have taken one button of type submit, and on this view. So as soon as we will click on this button, we are going to post this data from view to the controller. So inside that controller, there must be some one action method which is going to hold the data, right? So let's create one more action method over here, right? Action result, and let's make it the same method name as in the above, as we know that we can override the action, we can override action method inside a controller, right? So we are going to pass employee object. So let's pass object of employee, right? And this action method is going to returns of type action result. So we are going to return, let's suppose view, right? Right. So as I have told you that we are going to post data from view to the controller from this UI. UI is basically your view, right? So from this view, when we will click on this button of type submit, this is going to post data from view to the controller. So for posting data from view to the controller, we need to tell this action method that this the request is coming on this action method, that will be your post type. So we need to define the http post verb, right? We need to define http post verb, right? So by using this, we are telling this application that this method is of type http post. So any data which is coming from view to the controller on the click of the submit button, it will hit to this action method, right? And all the data will be loaded into this employee object. So let's see, I'm saving this file, and that this one is your by default get method, right, which is your http get by default, right? So let's save this and run our application. Now this time we are going to post data from view to the controller. So let's wait for a couple of seconds. So by default it will load the that previous one with pre-filled data, right, which we have already binded over here as hard coded, right? But we will change the data. So let's wait. Yeah, so we can see all the controls have been rendered. So now we are changing the data. Suppose Delhi, India, and now in the age we can take, let's suppose 100, and in the name, let's suppose we are going to pass Modi, right? And let's uncheck this checkbox. Now we are having this click me button. So as soon as we will hit this button, it will the control will hit the control will basically hit into this action method. So let's see. Yes, so I have click, control has been hitting, control is hitting on this action method, right? Because it is a post type. And in this employee object, let's see whether it is loading the correct data, whatever we are passing. Yes, in the address we are passing Delhi, age 100, name Modi, right? Whatever we have passed in our on this view, right? And the checkbox is unchecked, so that's why it is false for age employee, right? So that means, so this is the process how we can send data from view to the controller, right? So by using http post, and we are telling this application that this method is going to deal with a post type request, right? So one more thing I want to tell you, that now we are able to see that we are able to send data from view to the controller in this employee model, right? But we also need to check the validation whether the data is coming from view to the controller is correct or not. So for that, we will be discussing in detail in the upcoming videos how we can apply the validation. So this was the process how we can send data from controller to the view. That was the first one. And how we can send data from view to the controller, right? By defining this all these ways, right? So that is all for today. And in the upcoming videos, we will be discussing into more details. So please subscribe my channel and please like it and so that you can get all the latest notification in the future, right? So that's it for today. Thank you. Bye bye.